Many prisoners fought to save their fellows. One, William Wade Warren, took a sledgehammer and broke the lock on a cell door, releasing 25 of his friends. Another, George Johnson, snatched a set of keys from a guard and began unlocking cells in the upper tiers. Leo Matlock, who was serving a life sentence for murder, seized a pair of keys and managed to free dozens. Wild Bill Donovan, another convict, made repeated trips into the burning tiers, bringing his unconscious comrades into the prison yard. After rescuing 12, he was caught in the blaze and killed. One convict who managed to distinguish himself uniquely was a black prisoner known as the Deacon. While disorder reigned, the Deacon broadcast his own account of the fire over the prison radio station. He was affiliated with the Columbia Broadcasting System. "The campus of the prison is covered with men who have passed on," he said at one point. "This is a sight that I shall never forget after watching my fellow prisoners during the height of the horrors. I am glad to call them my brothers." The morale of the men was excellent. Not one tried to escape. The dead are all lying in the yard, and the newspaper photographers are now taking fat flashlights. The Deacon was later sent a check for $500 by CBS. Over 200 men in the upper tiers of the older wooden cell blocks died that day. There had been such confusion at the beginning of the fire, with guards running back and forth in the penitentiary office to get permission to unlock the cells, that by the time the official word was given to unlock, many of the cells had become searingly hot. The men inside were dead. One inmate, unable to escape, scrawled a simple note before he died of suffocation. Gus Saka notified John D., 93 Armory Avenue, Cincinnati. Several committed suicide by plunging their scorched faces into water basins. Noted the Cleveland News, 2 of the men had cut their throats, driven to suicide by the terror that grew on them as the flames mowed down their prison mates. Recalled a guard at the scene. "I saw the faces at the windows wreathed in smoke that poured through the broken glass. With others I tried to get at them, but we could not move the bars. Soon flames broke into the cell room and the convicts dropped to the floor. They were literally burned alive before our eyes." 2 guards ultimately managed to wrestle the keys from the master keeper. Fighting their way through the smoke-filled hallways, they unlocked as many cells as they could before being overcome by smoke. One of the 2 stumbled outside and handed his keys to a prisoner who continued unlocking cells. Though the inmates aided the firefighting efforts, some later on became unruly, menaced the firemen, and cut the hose from the pumper north of the kitchen. Axes and minor equipment were broken or stolen, rocks were thrown at the apparatus, and one group of convicts attempted to set fire to the large gasoline tank supply wagon of the department by igniting the piles of blankets which had been placed under the truck. The driver, although warned by the convicts not to do so, jumped on the truck and removed it from the grounds. The militia was mobilized promptly, and aided by naval reserves and almost the entire police force of Columbus, immediately established control. They kept back the public a block around the penitentiary, maintained open lanes for the fire apparatus, doctors, nurses, and rescue forces, and reinforced the guards within the walls. In the weeks following the fire, 3 separate investigations were initiated to determine its causes. The state fire marshal said that the blaze was not accidental but of incendiary origin. The governor of Ohio formed a board of inquiry. The board attributed loss of life to the delay in opening the cells, and Warden Thomas admitted that he was more concerned with a possible breakout than with the fire itself. But he blamed the state for overcrowding the prison. When asked why he didn't provide general fire protection, the warden explained that the Columbus Fire Brigade could reach the prison in a matter of minutes, and therefore the prison fire protection was unnecessary. He admitted that he had never given instructions to the guards on what to do in case of fire, and he hoped that they would use their common sense. Noted the warden, "If I was to blame for anything, I'd like to know it. I did 3 things: called the fire department, ordered the release of the men from their cells, and sought the protection of the public. Those things I had in mind when the fire began, and those I attempted to carry out." In August of 1930, 4 months after the fire, when confusion was still felt by many and emotions were still running high, the fire marshal obtained a statement from a man who claimed that the fire was premeditated and that he knew who the plotters were. This man, who would not reveal his name, informed the fire marshal that the men who started the blaze were counting on their fellow convicts being outside in the prison yard or eating in the mess hall when the cell blocks caught fire. This way, a major escape could take place while prison authorities were in a state of confusion. He also informed the fire marshal that a fuse, meant to light the oil-soaked cloth on the roof of the cell block, was timed for 4:30 p.m. The tragic miscalculation was that the fuse did not light the cloth until around 5:30 p.m., just when the prisoners were being locked into their cells for the night. The appalling loss of life was due primarily to the fire starting in a wood-roof building where a great number of convicts were concentrated. The combustible roof and other combustible materials burned rapidly and with intense heat. The unbroken area of the building, lack of protection, and the combustible forms afforded ideal conditions for the rapid spread of the fire. The loss of life was further augmented by the fact that convicts were confined in cells having individual locks, and the considerable delay arose in opening these locks due, it is said, to fear of mutiny among the convicts or lack of any definite procedure to follow in such an emergency. Although the fire department's response was prompt, the headway with which the fire gained before its arrival indicates that considerable delay occurred either in the discovery of the fire or in the giving of the alarm. Fireproof construction, fire division walls, adequate first aid equipment, and automatic sprinklers all could have mitigated the effects of the fire and prevented such tragic losses of life and property. There have been many other major fires in U.S. prisons since the Ohio State Penitentiary fire, but improvements in building construction and fire suppression systems have certainly shown a reduction in the loss of lives. The previously discussed prison.
The following is from an investigation published in the March 1978 issue of Fire Journal, printed by the National Fire Protection Association. In Maury County, Tennessee, on Sunday, June 26, 1977, during visiting hours in the afternoon, a fire broke out in the Maury County Jail. A 16-year-old was being held in a padded cell within the facility because he had flooded his original cell by plugging the toilet. The inmate asked a visitor for a cigarette and was obliged. And about 20 minutes later, the inmate was yelling about a fire in his cell. The jail was one level and had 10 cells for 40 prisoners in the main cell block. There were also female cells, drunk tanks, maximum security cells, and the one padded cell. There were 63 inmates and an unknown amount of visitors at the time of the fire. The construction was fire-resistant, mostly CMU walls inside and out. The roof was also concrete with asphalt and gravel laid on top. The inmate was rescued before deputies were overcome by thick, hot, black smoke. The Columbia, Tennessee Fire Department was 1 block away and arrived shortly thereafter. The keys to the cells were locked inside, so the fire department and towing company tore down some exterior walls. This is how those who survived the fire were rescued. There were a total of 42 fatalities, 33 inmates and 9 visitors were killed. Why was the toll so high in such a small prison? The NFPA lists 3 major factors in the deaths. The fuel, or padding, on the walls inside the cell created an extreme amount of smoke in the fire. The fire was not extinguished in the incipient stage, and there wasn't a reliable or quick way to evacuate prisoners and visitors, nor was there an immediate method of defending them. Also, the 2 building exits were not remote from one another, as required by NFPA 101-1976, the Life Safety Code. A hard lesson was learned, and this fire is still used as an example today.